Hello, guys. We are going to continue reading The Great Migration. Um, we left in this portrait of how this person represented everything that he saw. So we're going to finish this and hopefully you learn something. Families often gathered to discuss whether to go north or to stay south. The promise of better housing in the north could not be ignored. So you see the differences between both of them. Buildings versus a shack where they used to live in the South. The railroad stations were crowded with migrants. Letters from relatives in the North and articles in the black press portrayed a better life outside the South. Many migrants arrived in Chicago. In Chicago and other cities, they labor in the street mills. So steel mills. Sorry. So you got this representing the steel mills right here. Of course, there's better life in Chicago than the South. So, and the railroads and the migrants kept coming and coming. So everybody moving. Southern landowners, stripped of cheap labor, tried to stop the migrants from jailing the labor agents and the migrants. Sometimes the agents disguise themselves to avoid arrest, but the migrants were often taken to railroad stations and jailed until the train departed. Black and white Southern leaders met to discuss ways to improve conditions to stop the flow of workers in the North. Although life in the North was better, it was not ideal. Many migrants moved to Pittsburgh, which was a great industrial center at the time. So industrial center meaning there was a lot of factories, a lot of work in the factories. Although they were promised better housing in the North, some families were forced to live in overcrowded and unhealthy quarters. The migration soon learned that segregation was not confined to the South. So the representation of white people eating versus black tables, and they have the divisor in here: only whites, only blacks, and many northern workers were angry because they had to compete with their migrants for housing and jobs. There were there were riots. So again, representation of how he saw the riots and how he saw people. Long-time African American residents living in North did not welcome newcomers from the South and often treated them with disdain. So if you live in the North, if you're African American and live in the North, you didn't really want anybody else from the South coming up. And I call that selfish. The migrants had to rely on each other. The storefront church was welcoming place and the center of their lives, in joy and sorrow. Black professionals such as doctors, lawyers, soon to follow patients and clients north. Female workers were among the last to leave. Life in the North brought many challenges, but the migrants' lives had changed for the better. The children were able to go to school, and their parents gained the freedom to vote. And the migrants kept coming. There's a story of African American strength and courage. I share it now as my parents told it to me, because their struggles and their triumphs ring true today. People all over the world are still on the move, trying to build better lives for themselves and for their families. And I believe this Migration by Walter Dean Myers. In the waiting room, colored, hands claws as a black as the rich, Georgia, Carolina, Alabama, dirt they leave behind, clamps and unclamp silently. Some hold the Bibles older than freedom. Others hold food that will not last a long journey. They, there is there is no need to speak, to explain. How so many nights of love of terror, so many black crackings, heartbreakings, days, so many humble dreams, can fit into the small rope tied case that sits on the ancient hardwood floors between them. A string that is a ticket counter stiffens back, tightens stomachs. Hard eye, hard-eyed men with guns in their belts stare daggers into the waiting rooms. Colored. In the distance, the woo-hoo, woo-hoo of the train breaks the stillness of the forever movement. The men with guns look, shake their heads, and leave. Life goes on. The tickets to Chicago, Detroit, New York are heavy as the memory of the church built, with sweat, faith, and knotted pine on the edge of the old burying ground. But there are children, and there are hope of people with yet one more river to cross. All right, guys. So there. Hopefully, you guys learned something again, and we are finished with the Great Migration.